actually a political party in Egypt. It won a democratic election in Egypt before it was overthrown by the military. What do you make of the fact that there are certain members of Congress here in the United States who want to classify the Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist organization?
I must say it will be most unfortunate, and it will be a great mistake if State Department were to follow the ruling by Congress that the Muslim Brotherhood should be designated as a terrorist organization. At worst, it would be a self-fulfilling prophecy in the sense that young people who feel angry about the coup, young people who feel angry about the reinstatement of a dictatorship and their dashed hopes for democracy and human rights, that they will then begin to see who will take the fight to Sisi, who will take the fight to the West far more militantly, and I think that they may choose Daesh or ISIS as their premier organization for the expression of their anger. I think that Congress is making a grave mistake. I hope it is not simply one of those things that they are posturing about for the election, but certainly I think that we do not need to find more recruits for extremists. We need to, in fact, cut off the supply for recruits to extremists. We need to make sure that there are enough legal, non-violent avenues to register the amount of protests that are justified in that part of the world.
The Muslim Brotherhood is a huge organization in Egypt. It has millions of followers. What is the status of the Muslim Brotherhood right now in the country? Because we know that there has been a huge crackdown on its members. Have they gone underground?
Well, they're basically all in prison. The leadership of the organization is in prison. Human Rights Watch reported recently that there's approximately 42,000 political prisoners in Egyptian prisons, overwhelmingly Muslim Brotherhood members. The organization has been banned. It's been targeted for annihilation, largely as a result of the policies of the El-Sisi government, but also supported and financed by other authoritarian regimes in the region, primarily Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, who fundamentally fear the fact that the Muslim Brotherhood are challenging authoritarian regimes in the region. And that's why there's been this attempt to completely eliminate them from the political scene. But of course, the consequences of this, as we've seen before, and as Ambassador Rasool has just pointed out, the consequences of the attempt to annihilate and eliminate the Muslim Brotherhood is that it will simply fuel and further radicalization in the Middle East, in Egypt, and we're seeing that playing itself out right now before our eyes.
Saha, what do you think is behind this move to classify the Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist organization?
Thank you so much for having me again on the show. Always a pleasure to be on the heat. And thanks for asking me this particular question, because I think it is really a byproduct of the overall environment and climate that we are witnessing right now here in this country. The very vicious and very dangerous wave of Islamophobia and anti-Muslim bigotry and anti-Muslim hatred that has been surfacing in the rhetoric of some of the political candidates in the presidential election has been appalling and extremely dangerous. And really, I think that this move is a product of this overall environment of anti-Muslim sentiment and Islamophobia. My fear is that we're going to go down a very dangerous, slippery slope here. I totally agree with the two other respected guests on this show and everything they said about, fueling extremism and radicalization even further, because every time you suppress certain groups or label them or stigmatize them or create a fear of them, they start to be pushed to go underground. And every time you start to push them underground, that becomes a very fertile environment for violent extremism to emerge. So this is a very dangerous, slippery slope. Also, it might widen the umbrella for labeling and stigmatizing any group or movement that might have any kind of Islamic orientation or leaning, which is, again, a dangerous thing to do.
Ambassador, one of the candidates for president here in the United States in the Republican Party, Ted Cruz, he says that there is a string of evidence that shows that the Muslim Brotherhood supports terrorism, that its aim is to wage a religious war, a jihad against its enemies. Is there any evidence to support that?
I think that truth has been the greatest casualty in the Republican primary election, and so this must be taken with huge bags of salt. I think that the overall history of the Muslim Brotherhood since 1928 points only to one or two incidences in its entire decades-old struggle against Egypt. In fact, the Brotherhood in Egypt had taken a parliamentary route even under Mubarak. The Brotherhood in Egypt was a reluctant participant at first in the Tahrir Square uprisings. The Brotherhood reached out to the military to its detriment when it was the governing party of Egypt. And so I think that, like many other things, we cannot expect that Ted Cruz or any other Republican will put up, but they certainly also won't shut up. And I think that the onus is on him to produce the evidence that he has, rather than ask for the evidence of non-violence that he expects of the others. I think that very clearly what we need to deal with is the aftermath of a series of difficult mistakes that the United States had made in relation to Egypt. It bought peace for Israel by propping up a dictator at the cost of billions of dollars per annum. It said President Obama went to Cairo after he was elected. He called to the Egyptian people to rise up for democracy and for human rights. And when they did, he made his third mistake, and that is to tacitly support the coup d'etat by General Sisi against an elected government. And I think that if the U.S. goes through with this move on the basis of spurious evidence, then they will be committing the most fatal mistake that Egypt can't afford to have, and certainly that the region cannot afford to have.
Now, there is another way of looking at this, and that is if the United States goes ahead and classifies the Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist organization, why should Egyptians care about what the United States thinks about its political party?